Okay, so the very first thing the book says is to remove this pin, and that's what we're going to do. Whoops! Better not knock the camera.
And the tip there and tap it out with your pliers.
Yeah, I think it'll just come in. Just have to pull it. There we go.
There.
So that's the first step. Okay, so this was on like this. I'm just going to make sure that you can see it. So we just took a pair of pliers and took this out. Looks like it's good, could be cleaned, and that's what we're going to do. And then we're going to undo this nut. Okay, so now we're just going to undo this nut here. There we go. Okay, we figured it out. So we take this nut off. And looks like there might be a washer. No, it doesn't seem like it. And this is supposed to come off. Here is I have a piece of metal that's going across here, and I've taped it. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the wheel on here, and we're going to use the 4 studs to try and this metal will hit this, and as the wheel tightens it should pull this off. So we're making a kind of a homemade puller. We made our own puller with a 33-cent thing for the backyard. So that's what we're going to replace, is this. Okay, so we got to take this off and put it on the new one, but one of the things we noticed is this is kind of like not good enough, and you're going to want to strip it. So we found that using a good Allen wrench like this, right size is number 4, and it gets these bolts off rather good, and there's Loctite on them, just so you know. So this comes off. So I know you missed, what we've done is we took the new one and we replaced it with new parts, and we did that on the fly, so I didn't really have time to get the camera going because we were discovering it ourselves. But now that I know, the first thing you got to do is basically the way this works is this bearing goes in here like that, and this grease seal sits on top. And on the other side, this bearing goes with the open side down, okay? And it has a locking pin that goes in there. So you got to get this bearing down quite a bit. So the first thing we did, and I guess you would do this if you were just changing the bearings, okay? Because you wouldn't have a problem with your hub like I did. Is you would want to get the old ones out. So basically we took a hammer through the middle one, and we basically knocked this one out. So we removed this locking pin, and then we knocked this bearing out with a screwdriver. And then for the other bearing, what we did is because it's in there good, is we took a socket, and then I took a longer socket and basically took the hammer, bang, 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 and we drove that one out from the bottom. Okay, so now you have this. So what we had is a new hub, right? And then what we did is we greased everything, and you got to grease. So we had this blue bearing grease from Scooter West, and you grease all inside. And if you look at my bearing here, it's not really turning that well, and it's a good thing I'm replacing it. And I greased all that, You grease all around, you grease all the inside, and if you're not replacing your hub, you want to clean all this off and then re-grease it with new grease. And then basically you can take this. So what we did with these parts, by the way, is we stuck them in the freezer. And we let them sit there for, 3, 4, 5 hours, probably overnight's even better. And then they're going to be a bit smaller, okay? So they go in a lot easier. So you get them in, and then with this one here, we just took a hammer and tap, 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 tap. And you want to get it down far enough that you're able to put this seal, it just snaps in by your finger, it sits on top, and it's a grease seal. There's nowhere for it to go because it goes on a shaft that, if you look at it, the diameter gets a little bit bigger towards the end, so it can't really move that way once this is on. And then with respect to the big bearing, again you grease everything, and you grease the bearing, make sure there's a lot of grease in there. And you put it in this way, okay? And you're going to want to use another socket that, I don't have it right here, it's in my kit, but it's got to go on the outer edge of the bearing, okay? So you want the socket so that it's touching the outer edge of the bearing and not the inside of the bearing. So you want it on the outer edge of the bearing. And then once you have that socket, the best is you put it in a big vise or a squeezer and you squeeze it in till it gets down to the part where you can put this clip in there, okay? So then once that's together, and we'll show you that, you can then put this on and the writing goes on top. Okay, so that's 3.5 millimeter, 1K, blah, 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 goes on top like that, okay? And then we put the screws back in, and you're going to torque them, and then we're going to do that later on. Okay, so this is the new one. You can see that we've got the bearing and the pin inside, and this is the other bearing with the little grease seal, and there's all nice grease inside on both cases. So now we're just ready to install this onto here and torque it. Okay, so when you're tightening these, it's important that you don't go around 1, 2, 3, 4. You want to do 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, so that you don't warp it and it all tights, and we're going to do the same when we torque it. And I decided that I'm just going to put some extra grease in here because we had cleaned it all off before, so I'm greasing this whole thing and getting grease as much as I can get in there and give it a lot of grease. It's all bearing grease, I want to get it everywhere. And Scooter West, they know their stuff, man. They sent me just the right amount of grease here. Look at that. Okay, so that's good. I don't think we want it on the threads, right? Yeah, it's on the table. I got one here. So, I'm just going to take the grease off the threads. I don't think we want it there. Yeah, clean that up. And then we'll just stick this on. And we should be able to get the bolt on there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm just going to grease this. Get the grease out. And what I'm going to do is put a little bit of Loctite on that thread. And then we'll stick that in. So here, sort of dripping down a bit. I'll just clean that. And I'll put some on the inside of here.
Yeah, just a drop, that's all you need.
Yeah. and we'll stick that on. Okay, so the torque is 74 to 88. I'm close to 80 something, 83. And this should pull it in tight. And there we go. And now we're going to torque it. There we go. I think that's good. Okay, so then the last thing we do is stick this cover on. Somehow, I guess we bang it in. Does it bang in, or? If I remember correctly, the old one was bent in like that. We'll put the old one in. And we've got a new cotter pin. Let's stick that through. Did I put it the wrong way? Yeah, I'm going to put it that way, right? Good. And I put it right in the middle. Like that. There. I do believe we're ready to put the wheel on.